drafting in a few different Underdog Best Ball contests. That's what we're going to be doing today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find my newsletter at bengretch.substack.com, my YouTube that I've been pushing a little bit at youtube.com/@stealing signals. That one's been a lot of fun. Joining me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work at RotoViz, his other pods, the RotoViz Radio Network, obviously. Shawn, we're going to try to draft some different Underdog teams today. We are waiting for this is an Eliminator format to fill, just a couple left to fill. For those of you who are watching on the RotoViz YouTube, which you can always watch our beautiful faces on YouTube, you can follow along with the draft board with the Underdog screen. We have it pulled up. See who's in the queue, see the decisions we're making in real time. We'll obviously also try to explain that to the audio listeners as well. These other different formats don't always fill as quickly, so we're jumping on live now. We're going to start the Eliminator draft when it fills. We're going to maybe try a marathon if it fills while we're recording. We have some other topics to discuss. One that I've been digging into a little bit is the rookie running back, some of the efficiency stuff. And I say I've been digging into it because I'm usually just asking you about it because you're always digging into it. But this year I finally built a little bit of a lookup tool for myself and trying to dig into some of the prospect efficiency stuff, some of the missed tackle force and yards after contact per attempt. And those are the big ones that a lot of people tend to talk about are important for running backs. It's a fun class for a lot of reasons. I wrote a piece over at my Substack a while back, maybe about a month ago now, maybe a little longer, saying to hammer the rookie running backs in all formats. I thought they were great values in rookie drafts. And for those of you who still have dynasty rookie drafts coming up, that you can get some of these day 3 running backs in the third round of those rookie drafts, because they all landed abnormally this year, in my opinion, in good spots where the depth charts kind of line up for them. But Shawn, they're great in all these drafts as well. And it looks like this did just fill. I haven't even let you speak yet, but we are at the 103. How you doing? Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about some rookie running backs. We're going to start with this Eliminator draft, though.
We are, and I'm looking forward to this. This is one of my favorite tournaments, in part because it's different and you have to apply some different tactics. I mean, I don't like the idea of being eliminated, and yet the fact that does play in, those wrinkles are a lot of fun. And Ben, you put together an Eliminator strategy session over at Stealing Signals.
So and I'm going to write a second
elements.
I'm going to write a second because just like you said, I can't stop thinking about this format. One of the things that I added for the second one, I did some more research into the percentage of the field that's remaining as you enter each week. And really interestingly, because I don't think I've seen this anywhere else, and this is something that I didn't put into my first piece. That was an interesting way to think about it. You enter week 4 with 53.3% of the field remaining. You enter week 7 with 21% of the field remaining. You enter week 9 with 9.2% of the field remaining. You enter week 11 with 3.9%. The week 12 and 14 buys, people don't want to stack those because there's so many teams on buy. Only 2.3% of teams will make week 12. Only 0.8% will make week 14. So that's a really interesting element too. And you are profitable if you make week 12, if you make week 14. That's an interesting part. I think it falls off very quickly. Shawn, we're already on the clock. What do you want to do here at the 103? I'm open whatever direction you want to go. They're all great receiver options.
Well, I know that you're very high on Tyreek Hill, and he seems like the very
I've done a bunch of Hill eliminators already if you want to go Chase, but we can go Hill. All right, we do get Chase, and that's why I said we can go whatever way you want to go. I am really high on Hill. I think the volume consistency and the ceiling potential fits really well for the Eliminator, but I've taken him as high as 101 in the Eliminator format because I do think it leans toward a 0 RB structure. I have several Tyreek Hill Eliminator teams. I almost have too many. I'm starting to come around on the other profiles being right there with him. You made a great point to me when we talked about the Hill versus Lamb debate that the huge gap in routes probably will be there again this year. And that's something I was really focused on the per route volume. Hills is just astronomical, which I think creates this crazy floor. At any rate, what are your thoughts on Eliminator format overall? We did take Jamar Chase there. What are you thinking there? Give us some thoughts.
Well, I really like the way that you broke down how the contest plays out. and who is remaining as you go through the weeks. The flip side of that I think we also want to balance is this idea that smaller portions, more teams, a higher percentage of teams advance each week during the early weeks.
Yep.
And so if you have the buys, then not as many teams from your pod or pool or what have you are being cut during those weeks. Hopefully your team is still relatively healthier. And even something like getting to the final week, the gap between finishing first, which, Ben, you and I are going to finish first in one of these, $100,000 down to 10th is $10,000. Now, again, that's, not surprising. We know that's the way that these contests play out. But if you want to then advance through weeks 12 and 14, I do think that there's a lot of value to actually loading up on these week 5, 6, 7, 9 buys. And one of the things that Blair has shared with me recently, and I will get the original person who shared this as well. But just balancing your buys is probably a little bit more important than than some of us would like, because you want to be able to just take the picks that you enjoy. And yet it's also a lot of fun to actually draft with serious guardrails. And forcing yourself to, one of the other things that I don't necessarily like is to try and get ADP value, but trying to get your picks while you get ADP value is an interesting and sort of fun way to manage your exposures. So basically my point is that even though guardrails have some elements that maybe make an individual draft less fun, they also have elements that make a draft more fun. I do think that you want to be very intentional in terms of how you're spreading out your buys in this format.
Definitely. I was jumping right into stuff that I'm going to add to a second Eliminator thing. We should talk a little bit about my first Eliminator write-up at some point. All of that stuff you just said is definitely a huge part of what I think is the first things that you need to consider, certainly when you're starting to think about the Eliminator. And we should start there because we haven't done an Eliminator show yet. I'm very deep into the weeds. To that point, Shawn, we are approaching the 2-3 turn. We're going to have a lot of time in between our picks to talk. As we approach this turn, one of my favorite things to do in the second round is to take a 49ers receiver who I'm not taking in a lot of second rounds because of volume concerns, but the week 9 bye is the hardest one to get into your roster because the San Francisco 49ers and the Steelers are the only two teams on bye that week. There's only 2 such weeks where only 2 teams are on bye. The Steelers are a team I'm not playing heavily. Obviously, you can play the running backs. You could play Freiermuth later. I think Pickens is one of the more overrated mid-round receivers. Don't love Roman Wilson late. Don't love anything in Arthur Smith's offenses. And the Niners, other than these guys, and Debo does go, you have a Kittle out. But obviously with Christian McCaffrey going early, it gets tough to get a week 9 buy into your build. We are on the clock. Those guys all went. Jalen Waddle got back to us a week 6 buy. Completely agree with everything you were saying about those early buys. He's a really natural pick for me here. What do you think?
Yeah, and that I think in some ways redeems the sort of snap decision I made there to go ahead and take Chase based on your exposure thoughts on Tyreek Hill. I mean, Jalen Waddle, if everything goes to plan, is going to score a lot fewer points than Tyreek Hill, but there are still scenarios out there where he ends up being the star. A lot of that is priced in, here at the 210, and yet he's still one of these guys that I think is set up to potentially smash, has the high floor, has the buy that we want, sets up some other things as we work through. And it's a good balance off of that Bengals pick, which actually does have not just in and of themselves, but has some other kind of cascading buy problems as we go through.
For sure. And we get back like, Neighbors goes 1 pick before us. And Diggs, Devonta Smith, and Mike Evans at the turn. It really does wipe out the receiver position. I'd be willing to pull up a receiver that you like here, Shawn. Whether that's, we could take Achane as well, but we already have Waddle. Kyron Williams would be a fine pick. I tend to go 0 RB. It's up to you because I know you don't like these top receivers. Any of these picks are fine by me. That was a good pick. He takes DJ Moore there, and week 7 is the other bye where there's only 2 teams on bye. I don't take a lot of DJ Moore in this range. I have taken him in Eliminators. It goes right back to that point of trying to spread out your buys. Week 7's also a difficult one to hit. The only teams on bye week 7 are the Bears and the Cowboys. There are more options on those teams. So the thing about the Niners in week 9 is that once Christian McCaffrey and Ayuk and Debo are all off the board by the end of round 2, you basically have Kittle, and then you have Pearsall late, but in an eliminator format, Pearsall's kind of a contingency bet for the people that are drafting. I'm not even taking a lot of him. And then you have the late round contingency running backs. But that offense we expect to be very concentrated, and the bulk of it is off the board by the end of round 2. And then I just mentioned some of my concerns with the Steelers. The Bears and Cowboys, it's easier to get into the week 7 buys, but you do only have the 2 teams. Because, I think you can play the Bears a few different ways throughout drafts. Cowboys, not so much, though. So I do like getting an early week 7 buy into the build. That was a smart decision there. We were looking at Metcalf, DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp would have been one we could have pulled up. We could have brought up like Zay Flowers or Tank Dell, but they have week 14 buys all the way to 303. And then the running backs that were available were Achane and Kyron Williams. We already had Waddle. We already had a week 6 buy. They both have week 6 buys. Kupp does as well. So we would already have been stacking a buy. I agree with you, Sean, that just balancing the buys. One of the really great things is if you do take different buys to the first 5 or 6 rounds, it opens you up to values as you go. When you start to take multiple 6-round buys early, like we probably would have done if we would have just taken our best player available there, you get to a point later on where you're like, I can't really afford to add 6-round buys, but there's a pick that's a lot more natural of a fit then. Early, basically all picks are pretty justifiable, right? Early rounds, you can just say, okay, well, I'm going to play it as the buys and mix up exposures as you talked about and give myself optionality late so that my build can come together. I really like the Eliminator teams that I've done. I'm doing almost all of mine in slows, but I really like the ones where I have that optionality. I spread out my buys like very effectively in the early rounds. And just to put a little information on that, the only weeks that there are buys at all, because there's none in week 8, are 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 14. It's 8 weeks. 2 of them have 6 teams on a bye. That's 12 and 14. And there's a ton of good teams in the back part of drafts. And what's really interesting about those numbers I was sharing about how few teams actually make it to 12 and 14 is I do think there's 2 ways to play these eliminators, Sean. If you're trying to win it, I agree completely with you that you want to have some early buys, because in the early weeks, about 80% of each pod advances. As you get further along, it gets down to 60%, 55% in week 12. And then even in like weeks 15 and 16, half of the pods advance 50% each week down the stretch. So it does get tougher, and the pod gets tougher because teams have been eliminated. Your pods are all of the good teams that have advanced through, and fewer, a lower percentage out of each of those pods advances as you go along. So it's definitely a lot easier to advance early, as you said. Makes sense. If you're trying to win the thing, get your buys out of the way early, get through that earlier, easier portion of the advance, and have most of your roster ready for the later portions of the year. But the second way to play it, Sean, would be to stack up those week 12 and 14 buys. You're not really playing to win, but you're playing it as more of like a cash game or an ROI booster. If you go out in week 12, you actually 5x your $10 entry fee, you make a $50 prize. If you go out in week 14, you 10x it, you make a $100 prize. And so I do think if a draft pushes you towards a lot of week 12 and 14, you can make an argument that it's hard enough to get there. You could really stack and be playing for the 5x or the 10x. That's not the ideal, but it is one way you could go with it. And I've had some teams where I've just sort of said, this team's probably not going to get through 12 or 14, but in all likelihood, it's not going to make it there anyway, because 97.7% of teams aren't making it to week 12. So, I'm building in a suboptimal way, but it was a suboptimal draft for me to get a top 1 percentile build out of this. At least I'm helping my odds of getting to where I'm a profitable build in that week 12, week 14 range, and advancing that far by putting a lot of back end buys and having all of my players active in the early part. So there's different ways to go about it. It's a very fascinating contest.
Yeah, and I love the flexibility that you're describing there in terms of not playing every draft the same way. And I do think there's some value to attacking those week 12 and 14 buys with some of the later pieces on your team. Again, if the draft ends up that direction. Now, Ben, as we've come through, it's kind of interesting. Pickens, who is not somebody that we're targeting, but he did fall about 4 spots below ADP. And as you mentioned, he has that week 9 bye. He does go 1 pick right ahead of us. That was maybe going to be a difficult choice if we had it. Now it kind of lines up that Trey McBride is the second best value, and he seems like very clearly the best play.
Yeah. I would have been comfortable taking Pickens, especially if McBride went there 1 pick before us. You had those two as the top in the queue. Like you said, it's an interesting opportunity to be humble in our approach. Pickens is not a guy that I don't think I've drafted him. Even in my eliminators, he's not a guy that I've taken a lot of. I think he's overpriced by a couple of rounds. But once you get that opportunity in an eliminator at a discount because of his buy, you can make that pick. Now you have Jaden Reed at the top of the queue here. He would not. He gives us another access to another buy option. We can go that direction.
Did you have somebody else that you wanted to float here?
No, I don't. I don't really have a good alternative. I just think Jaden Reed's overpriced. I talked about it with Pete a little bit on. I was a guest on Pete and Pat's normal spot on Best Ball Breakfast yesterday. You're usually right before them with the Best Ball Banana Stand. And Reed came up in our draft, and he mentioned that you were just making the case earlier on the show with him that Reed is maybe undervalued by multiple picks. I made the little case that
Ben, it sounds like I went on and embarrassed myself by saying he's the best price player in the entire fantasy universe. And then you came on right after me. It's like, no, the exact opposite.
That's a very speaking of humility, that's a very humble perspective, but every time we've ever disagreed, I think you've been right. So my track record in disagreeing with you, especially on young breakout wide receivers in these middle rounds, I can remember many where I just didn't see the vision, and you've nailed a lot of those over the years. So I'm not going to say that's the case. I do think it's a really unique perspective situation, Sean. The case that I made was that because this is such a young receiving core, all of these guys are the 2023 draft class or the 2022 draft class. They went into training camp last year. Everybody on the roster was a rookie or a second-year pro entering training camp. They had 11 wide receivers, all 11. No veterans on the roster. Because of that, they used a lot of different stuff. Jaden Reed, I think, is a good player. He hits early because he's a good player. He's also in a good role for like that type of offense that didn't have clear winners on the outside and didn't know where it wanted to go. So they used him a lot in motion. They gave him a lot of design touches. I think it helped elevate his production. I think he's a good player in a good spot in a good offense, and he's a high floor player. I also think he's an example of something I've talked about with Puka Nacua as well, where even though they're rookies and were very, very good, very efficient, it's not the same for me in my head that they're going to be able to build off a really great rookie year. For me, it's like they hit an 80th percentile outcome as a rookie, and they're going to build. But then if they go down to a 50th percentile outcome in year 2, their production might stay pretty flat or even come down a little bit. In Reed's case, I'm especially concerned because the other receivers on the roster, you'd expect, because there's so many of them, someone kind of takes a step forward. Either Watson stays healthier, or maybe it's Dobbs that takes a step forward, or maybe it's Dontavian Wicks, who's everybody's favorite sleeper. One of those guys takes a step forward as a more consistent, legit outside threat. Maybe they're doing less of the gadgety type stuff for Reed. I still think Reed's a very productive slot receiver in this situation, but I don't think he's overpriced necessarily. I actually think he's probably fine in this range regardless, but I like to play the Packers through the cheaper options because I do think we're going to find out that it's the production is going to come closer together. Whoever rises up is going to meet Jaden Reed and going to be a bigger hit later, whichever one of, whether it's Watson, whether it's Wicks, those are probably my two favorite ways to play it. I'm not drafting Dobbs at his cost, but anyway, that would be my 2 cents on it. But he was a really good fit. Week 10 bye we didn't have yet. The other top options were Hollywood Brown. We already had a week 6 bye with Waddle. Keenan Allen, we already had DJ Moore on the roster. Terry McLaurin had a very late bye. There wasn't really another good wide receiver option there.
Yeah, and I think you describe how it might not work out for Reed. One of the things that jumped out to me with him, and this is a guy that I wasn't on preseason, And so, this is forcing me to come off of what I really thought was indicated by the prospect profile. But I mean, not only did the stats show him as the guy who looks like the clear-cut star, whereas I sort of think we're going to get cannibalization behind him. When you watch them play, he was absolutely electric.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there were, more than 5 receivers in the NFL last year who actually looked better, in the final third of the season when you're watching those games. And so when I see that and the stats fit, and you're going to have this extremely explosive offense, it's hard for me to not take that. And so I think that partly for me, the difference there is that with Reed, you're actually getting a great price on the number one in an explosive offense. Whereas there are a couple of other offenses that we are so clear on the offense itself being explosive, and we're so clear on the players being talented, that I do like to get the second or the third guy. And so examples of that might be San Francisco or the Houston Texans, for example. And Houston, I just want as many pieces of that in any possible way as I can get.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit the difference for me. And I've got an article coming out possibly before the show even releases. It's going to look at the 5 best values in Superflex. And it's interesting because it kind of dovetails with this discussion we're having here with this idea of how do you play these offenses that have multiple good picks.
So we did just get back on the clock. I think that's all very interesting stuff. We have about 20 seconds. Kittle goes there. Would have been an interesting second early tight end with his bye. You have Walker in the queue I'm very comfortable with. You have Deontay Johnson and JSN. Both could make it around, or we could end up taking 2 receivers if we took one and another one. I'm fine with the Walker play at this point. Pretty good bye, too. So he has a week 10 bye. He does match up with Reed, but there's not a ton of like high-end players on that week 10 bye. I don't usually run into huge log jams with week 10 in building these out. It does make the next pick ideally not JSN, which is who we would have probably went, because now we have Reed in the wide receiver core with the week 10 bye and Kenneth Walker. I mean, we can make a bet on the Seahawks. Ultimately, and I'll get to this in a sec, but you have Deontay Johnson at the top of the queue. Are you pretty comfortable with Deontay Johnson here? He would be my pick as well.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I do think that it would be interesting to get that week 5 bye from Jameson Williams onto the team here. Tennessee, the Chargers, the Eagles, once their stars are gone, hard to get that week 5 bye in a different way. And, once Williams is gone, probably hard to get it from Detroit as well.
I hear that, but I would still pretty comfortably be Deontay, because I still think the element of the Eliminator format where you want some, sort of weekly consistency. Deontay Johnson, I don't know where I'm going to end up projecting his targets. I haven't been there, but I've talked about this a lot. He goes in a range where I don't think you can make a case for anyone else to project within like 20 targets of him. I think I can make a strong case for Deontay Johnson to get 150 targets this year. I don't know that you can. 160 maybe. And I don't know that you can really talk about that with anyone else going in his range. I think he's weirdly mispriced because people are just out on him and have been. He's the new Jarvis Landry of this era. And then also people are out on Bryce Young and the Panthers. Weirdly mispriced from the perspective that number ones in not great situations are going 3-4 rounds higher than him. I'm not saying he's a better pick than like a Jaden Reed or a George Pickens, who we were considering earlier, but it just like Terry McLaurin. And it just seems like he fits Johnson in those ranges. When you consider his target earning profile is better than all of those guys by a lot, the depth of it as well, the targets per out run, the many years he's done that. He did it as a prospect. At any rate, we do take Deontay Johnson there. Jameson Williams, for me, I was going to say probably projects for 80 fewer targets. And so you're going to have more down weeks. Now, the best ball element, you still want spike week. So one of the big things, Sean, when I was talking about my first write-up, and I was trying to emphasize when I started talking about the percentage of field remaining every week, is that I think people think of this as a floor contest, and you do still have to build a ceiling thought process into your build. And in fact, a big part of the way that I would characterize my first write-up on the Eliminator format is basically that I thought that there was an opportunity here where a lot of people were going to focus on the floor plays, and you could take a more extreme ceiling type perspective because most of the teams are going to get eliminated before, week 8 anyway. That's the reality. 87% are going to be eliminated by midseason anyway. And so when it comes to like a player like Deontay Johnson, I don't necessarily think he is a way better pick in this format. I hear your case for Jamison Williams there and with the bye as well. But it is such a large gap that despite that, is essentially the thing that I'm saying. But we have now built a team that has 1 running back, 1 tight end, 5 early receivers. It's a pretty imbalanced team. Some of the stuff I saw on the Eliminator format was talking about balance. And I made the case also in my write-up, Shawn, that imbalance was how you created floor. We've talked about this with zero RB over the years, that having the redundancy at receiver and having the depth of really good receivers actually creates a high floor. And how you get a fragile build is you start to build too much running back into your early build, because that's where the busts stack up and that's when you finish last place in your home league. We've always talked about zero RB for home leagues that way. You're probably at worst going to finish like 6th because you're going to have something to rely on. Your receivers are going to give you some stability. And then if you hit on running back, you're in an even better situation. It's similar in this best ball lens, where if we can get enough really good receivers built into this, and if we go full zero RB, even if stronger than this, if we had taken 6 receivers at this point, if we went Deontay and JSN instead of Kenneth Walker and Deontay at the last turn, I think you feel really good about your 3 receiver slots and the flex. Trey McBride is obviously going to provide some tight end value. And then you're like, well, if I hit on anything at running back, I'm certainly in a good spot. But that's how you provide floor. Even if you have to take a 0 at running back some weeks, the difference between a 0 and a 5 or an 8-point week or a 10-point week gets overstated, that floor. And what really advances you, in all formats, what really gives you high scoring is the ceiling weeks, the amount of 25-point weeks in your lineup. And you hit that with a lot of really good receivers, you're gonna have a better shot at hitting that with a lot of really good receivers. And so our build is trending that way. You just had Jalen Ward at the top of the queue. He goes 1 pick ahead of us. He's that week 9 bye. He would have been a great pick there. That leaves Bowers at the top of our queue on your board. I assume Najee Harris already went too. I don't love taking Harris, but he's a player that I would be comfortable with in this format.
He did go, yeah.
You have Jonathan Brooks at the top of the queue, tough in an eliminator. I'm comfortable just taking Bowers here and then figuring it out on the turn. He's another week 10 bye, so we are starting to stack that. One of the other points, when I mentioned there's only 8 weeks that have buys, you have to draft 18 players, right? So the average, if you got it perfectly equitable, would be about 2.4 buys per bye week. That's why it's really important to at least get 1 of each buy, but you're going to have some buys where you have 3 buys. Or 3 players on that bye. We now have that with week 10. That's okay. You're going to have some that have 4 in all likelihood. We are back up. Shawn came around the turn quick. I like either of the plays that you have. Javonte Williams is another one. I know he has the late bye, but I love him in all formats, and I think he makes a lot of sense in an eliminator because I think he's a volume play with efficiency upside. You have Benson at the top of the queue. Do you like the read I'm getting out of Arizona is Benson's like a straight handcuff. And so that's a tough play if Connor actually stays healthy. We talked earlier this offseason. He had his best rushing season of his career last year, both from an efficiency and a total yardage standpoint. We do grab Javonte Williams there as I was kind of narrating as you were moving the queue around. You had thrown Jaden Daniels into the queue. He would have been a fine play as well. Benson wasn't necessarily my favorite. That's our first week 14 bye, and I like that you've stayed away from that, but it was fine, I think, to add to our build at this point. Do you want to talk through your thoughts on that turn as I was kind of just narrating for people?
Well, as we switch back over here to this other tab and look at the draft grid, I really wanted Jalen Warren to make one more pick.
Yep.
Because with him as the week 9 bye and the perfect way to play the Pittsburgh Steelers and to get us that second running back. I mean, if you can get the elite tight end and get those 5 early wide receivers and still come out of it with Kenneth Walker and Jalen Warren, then you feel like you have a team that, like, just with those players, now obviously you have to add in a quarterback at some point, but just with those players, you have a team that you could go out with and not even continue drafting. Now, I mean, obviously you need to do that, but My point is that you are so perfectly covered for both that floor element and the ceiling element that you were discussing. And so, again, we would have loved that. Once he goes, then I don't think that Zach Moss is a great pick with a Jamar Chase. Jonathan Brooks, with already having Deontay Johnson, and with the issue that he may not give us those early week points. And I think that you have to be careful about getting too conservative in this format.
Right.
At the same time, when you're being given essentially equal options, I just don't think you can take the rookie who may not play because, as you said, you've got to get through those early weeks. And
That's
so
exactly how I would. Sorry to cut you off, but that's exactly how I would put it. Is you can make the mistake of being too conservative. I talked about I wrote that up a lot. That was like the focus of my first write-up of the Eliminator. At the same time, a play like Javonte Williams for me isn't just a floor play. I think there are ceiling paths for him. So in the Eliminator, I'm thinking through James Conner too. If he stays healthy all year, I think he can have a really good year out of the 8th round. I'm trying to think through these guys where we have the quote unquote guaranteed touches. They're former dead zone type backs, but we get them at a cheaper price. And I do actually think there's some ceiling there for them on a full season perspective. Maybe it's not as enticing as a young player like a Jonathan Brooks or a Trey Benson, but to get a Javonte Williams in this build makes sense. Jalen Warren is another great example of that. And I'm right there with you. With the week 9 bye, he was just, we were both, I obviously, mentioned that after he went, without knowing your thoughts. We were both pretty devastated by that. I was ready to go to Najee Harris, Sean. That's how devastated I was about it. It would have been a nice fit for this format. But yeah, those types of plays where you both get some full season upside, but also can project a little bit more stability of role early. They don't have to have the anti-fragile element where like can't think of the word from the anti-fragile definitions. I mean chaos, but what is a shock to the system, right? That causes the anti-fragile player to rise among that chaos, right? To benefit from the shock to the system. So the players that don't need the shock to me are a little bit more interesting in Eliminator. Wow, I had a hard time getting that out, but hopefully it made sense.
No, I like it. I like it.
Javonte has some risk.
Kind of think through and get to where we're going in this, and I think those are the exact right points. And Javonte Williams is somebody where I think you can potentially argue, well, maybe there's threat to him, and so we're gonna avoid him a little bit more than we would maybe naturally in normal drafts. But then you switch back to this format, and you're like, well, in this format, I'm going to go ahead and just go after my thesis, which is that he remains the starter and he leads the NFL.
Right. Exactly.
Running back receptions.
Perfectly put. We're up with 15 seconds. You have Caleb Williams at the top of the queue. We have the DJ Moore. He's got the nice buy. He makes a lot of sense as our QB1. Probably in a 3 QB build at this point. It's kind of a natural format for that. So you get different outs at QB. It helps your floor each week. It helps protect you from taking a 0 out of position where you can't really afford a 0 in an eliminator format. If you have a guy on bye and another guy missing time and you only have 2 QBs, I mean, that's a risk. I wrote up in my first write-up, again, to this idea of being too conservative sometimes, that you can still do 2 QB builds in this. That's just the risk you're taking on. You're basically saying, if my 2 QBs don't stay healthy all year, I'm probably going to go out 1 week. Or, I mean, there's a possibility that if you take a 0 at QB, you can still somehow get some pod luck or advance, because if you get a lot of spike weeks at receiver or what have you, it doesn't mean you're definitely out the second you take a 0 at QB, but it's not going to help, right? It's definitely a risk. I think you probably want to shade toward 3 QB builds is the point I'm saying, but in certain instances, you can be flexible to that and take on that risk. It's all about picking the risk you're going to take in all these formats. We're always taking some risk. We can't build contingencies for everything. It's all a calculus between the risk profiles and the contingencies we can build and the upside and the floor. And at any rate, we took Caleb Williams. He makes a lot of sense with this build. The right buy, we got the stack with DJ Moore. We're back up. You have 2 at the top of our queue, and I'm very comfortable going with these 2 QBs in the QB window that both provide us some strong weekly upside and are both stacked. Is that the way that you would see it?
Yeah, the other opportunity here would be to go with Jerry Jeudy. He does give us a first, second buy of the same week at receiver, but he matches up with both of our first two receivers in terms of week 16 and 17.
I really like him, but I do think I'm going to lean Tua if that's we're
Okay.
low on the clock. And the reason is, I agree with you that it's important to think about buys positionally, but we're probably in a 2 tight end build with McBride and Bowers, and Bowers does have the week 10 bye, and our RB1 Kenneth Walker also has a week 10 bye. So there is a little bit of pressure on week 10 in our flex. It is, and we only had the one other week 10 wide receiver bye, but Jeudy maybe wasn't a perfect fit for that perspective. I also just like this idea of getting the second QB here. And now we can potentially do that 2 QB build I just talked about, or potentially just take like a Bo Nix very late as a third option, or some of the upside. Yeah, like you're starring Drake May and Daniel Jones as exact Justin Fields. Those are exactly the types of QB3s that now become open to us, where we don't even have the 17-week certainty, but it provides us some ceiling to the position. Fields won't match anyone's buy. We didn't really have any other great. I guess we had Deontay Johnson with Bryce Young. Maybe
But
Jeudy was the right
I think
pick
getting
there.
Tua with Williams. So the point that you made that you want to think of buys positionally is important. And so that would have just given us the 2 week 10 with the wide receiver. But then once you get your second buy at receiver, it does go back into that overall context. If you're going to have a tight end that week, you're going to have a running back that week. Again, it's going to be impossible to avoid everything, especially as we get through the final 18 picks. I mean, you mentioned the average number of buys you're going to have, so you don't want to get too paranoid about it. And
Right.
then Pete and I have had really what I would consider a pretty golden run in our best ball banana stand drafts. And certainly I would love for anybody who's interested in those to subscribe to that feed on the RotoViz radio network. But we did run into one yesterday that turned into a crazy avalanche. And at one point, I decided that maybe we should push Jeudy because it would give us 3 week 10 buys and our first 5 wide receivers. And in the end, it was mostly just like, well, we needed the wide receiver firepower.
You needed Jeudy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to balance those two things as you're moving through a draft and understand, what's coming in the future.
That's a great point as well. Yeah, I mean, I think Jeudy could have been a good fit for this team. There was something you said in there that triggered something in my mind. This Eliminator format really is so fun. There's so many ways we can go with it. There's been a bunch of ancillary thoughts that I've had, and obviously I've gone off on a bunch of tangents already. But I'm trying to categorize them while drafting so that I can come back around to them. But this is a build that I really like right now. I think Jeudy could have fit there as well, and I agree with your notes that you can't be too paranoid about the buys. Oh, that's what it was. One of the things I've noticed, so I agree with that. We just got about 3 or 4 picks, one off the clock in a second. We're rapidly approaching getting back on the clock, so I'll probably forget this again. But I don't want to stack too many buys with my good players in the early rounds. I want to spread out how I stack my buys because I've done this, and then I balance the buys later, and then I'm like, yeah, but the guys that I'm expecting to produce when all my good players are on buys aren't good players. They're all double-digit picks, and so I think that's a thought to consider as well. That's the short version. A bunch of good running back options just went off. Sean Kendra Miller just went. Another week. So you have Jalen Wright at the top of the queue. I definitely like that. We have the Tua Waddle thing. Yeah, I think Quentin Johnston's viable in this format. You just moved him up. Marshawn Lloyd's another one that I'm pretty into here.
He would give us 2
another
week 10 running back buys,
yeah.
But I am okay still going that route.
Let's go. Well, yeah, I mean, we're kind of stacking buys regardless, unless you want to go Quentin Johnston and then play the running back on the way back. Get our wide receiver 6 here. Yeah, I guess that's the way to play it. Because the other guy that makes the most sense to me actually here in this list is down at the bottom is Kamani Vidal. We could just take him at 147. Lloyd goes right behind us. I think he has an easier path. Again, this idea of like not needing shocks to the system to get volume, like Jalen Wright probably needs one. At the same time, you don't want to completely not take handcuff. Like if Raheem Mostert gets hurt in week 1, then the team that wins the Eliminator is going to be a Jalen Wright team, right? Like he's a week 6 bye. He fits. We have a Tua Waddle thing going. We're already in on Miami. It's not a bad pick, but Vidal's a guy that just feels like he could carve out a role without needing competition. He's someone we could talk about more if we do decide to talk about the rookie running backs a little bit, some of the efficiency stuff, but he was second in all of college football per PFF in total missed tackles forced last year. Had a lot of work on that as missed tackles forced per touch, not like as massively impressive, but it's an exciting thing to his profile that he is evasive and is able to force those missed tackles and things. They've been talking him up a little bit. Greg Roman's been talking him up a little bit. So we are up. We have that choice. I don't mind if you want to go right. If you think right's a better fit here, we do have Walker and Javonte Williams.
So one of my questions for you, the other back that we're going to talk some in the show, kind of in between drafts, is Bucky Irving. I think that one of Irving and Vidal will come back.
Yeah, so let's go right. That's what I was thinking. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking maybe Vidal has a better chance of coming back, and Irving is similar to Vidal, has a really good missed tackles force stuff. And yeah, I had mentioned in an email to you, both those guys stood out. And we were talking before our last recording last week, Sean, about our exposures a little bit. I think Vidal's your highest exposure player. Irving is mine at the current, but we're both high on both backs in our own drafts right now. So I think that's a smart way of thinking through it, is getting right there. He stacks in with our Miami build. And then either Vidal or Irving making it back would be pretty great, and we can play it either direction. It's probably going to be Irving. I do think Vidal probably goes, but right with the early buy, he, not somebody that we're probably relying on a ton early, but he remains the biggest like handcuff play you can make in fantasy. Again, Raheem Mostert led the NFL with 21 touchdowns last year and is going in like round 8 this year. I mean, we're very clearly as a market saying that Mostert's not going to score 21 touchdowns again this year. Otherwise, he's the best pick in all of drafts. And if he's not going to score 21 touchdowns again this year, what's notable about that is, okay, well, you could say maybe they just won't have so many touchdowns. Devon Achane had another 11 in the same offense. They actually had 32 between their top 2 backs last year. So yeah, that might come down a little bit, but there's plenty of touchdown production to go around. Achane can come up from that 11 to 15 or 16, which would still be a ton. And there might still be 10 plus more to go around. And even if Mostert went all the way back down to 10 touchdowns, he's a great pick in the 8th round. The market is not buying him at his age, continuing to produce like that. And if you think through market dynamics and those things, I mean, the beneficiary would be that Jalen Wright is, yeah, he's a handcuff, but he's also a handcuff the market is saying is more likely to get into a role and a valuable role than most handcuffs, because it's, the fragility of Mostert, but people are also concerned about Achane's fragility. And if either of them misses time, the presumption is that Wright would play more. And there's not just the 32 TDs, the efficiency for both backs, the efficiency in the whole offense, the way that, McDaniel runs things. You'd expect Wright, presuming that he steps into a role and he's the next guy up, which it seems like he would be. He's got that, speed profile that McDaniel's looking for. You'd assume that as soon as that happens, if it does, if it's not Mostert and Achane both playing 17 games this year, if one of them misses some time, that Wright's like basically immediately viable, right? I mean, just immediately a piece to the puzzle for your best ball builds. And if that happens to be weeks 15, 16, and 17, that's, in all formats is going to be a smash.
Yeah, I mean, you win the tournament, or someone with a team like you wins. I have this written up for a different format that is full PPR, so the numbers are slightly different. But I wanted to share, because in terms of those 5 crazy prices, it probably doesn't shock you that one of the 2 Dolphins backs you just mentioned fits in that category. Last year, Miami scored 60 more points than the McCaffrey-led 49ers in second. 16 more running back points. They outscored the team in 5th, which was Arthur Smith's Bijan Robinson experiment, by 170.
Jeez.
They were number 3 in rushing EP. They were number 3 in receiving EP. Obviously, they ranked number 1 in fantasy points over expectation by a massive amount. Achane and Mostert both averaged about a touchdown per game just on efficiency alone. So, in terms of what their FPOEs were on a per game basis. So yeah, everything that you're saying there. Oh, Bucky Irving goes one spot ahead of us.
As an RB6, we only have 3 RBs. He would have been a really important RB4 to this build.
Whew, that's a dagger.
That is a dagger. That one hurts. I'm very comfortable with you've put Marvin Mims in the queue. We only have 9 seconds. We're going to auto Drake May if you don't move something up. I like Mims over Franklin if you want to grab a receiver here, or we could grab one of those veteran running backs you put. So you also threw Khalil Herbert, J.K. Dobbins into the queue. Dobbins is another way to play the same, Vidal thing with the Chargers. It's less stable, but because he's coming back from an Achilles, he very well may not play. But it seems like a little bit of a floor play with a week 5 bye that would make sense for this build. We grabbed Mims, which gives us a backdoor to Nix as our QB3 in the final round. Man, that Irving pick was a dagger.
But I do like getting a Denver receiver there. We can certainly afford the week 14 bye, of which, we're not going to end up with that many. Just as we're set up right now, we can afford that as what might be our last receiver pick. Obviously, that fits nicely with the Cincinnati Bengals pick of Jamar Chase in the first round. So I like that. And then I think that, even though there are some potential issues with it, betting on or, making this our Dobbins scenario, I think works, but I'm very good with Khalil Herbert as well.
I could go either way with it. Yeah, the Chargers, the Bears backs would have been the other option. I do like going Dobbins there, actually, and you just clicked him, in part because we already did the Miami Tua Wright Waddle thing, and then we also have Caleb Williams and DJ Moore. I kind of feel like it's a lot of pressure on your team in both weeks 6 and 7. If you have a QB, running back, and a wide receiver, all like the running back element to the stack is really the thing where I'm like, it's a directional bet on the team's offense for the season, and that makes sense for the Eliminator standpoint. If Miami is the team this year, like if McDaniel does get everything to work this year and Jalen Wright gets into a role in addition to that, you're talking about Tua, Waddle, and Jalen Wright all benefiting, right? And that's good for the Eliminator. That's good for any format, but especially for the Eliminator, it would provide us some nice floor to 3 different positions at once. The same thing could be true of the Chicago back team stack as well. But the part of it that I'd be slightly, concerned is like in the Eliminator, you do want to be a little bit cautious of overstacking because then you get a lot of important players in one bye category. And adding that running back to the stack is probably the least important part of it because you want the week 17 spike week potential, and that's where the QB wide receiver thing comes in. That's where the Caleb Williams, DJ Moore element is very exciting. If we throw in the Bears running back there, now we're just sort of, we're making a bet on the Bears offense similarly to the one I just described with the Dolphins, but we're also stacking up our bye. Although that week 7 bye, we don't have anything else on, and there's only 2 teams on bye that week. So, one of the things to consider about that, though, as well, Shawn, is there's only 2 teams on bye that week. So in our pod, not a lot of people are going to have players on buys, right? So you have to think through that part of it as well. There's not going to be...
if you're 3 out, you're facing everybody else with a full lineup.
With a full lineup. That's probably the week you get bounced because you have overstacked the one week that no one else has buys, Not no one else. The Cowboys are also on bye with them. The CeeDee Lamb team is hurt that week. There's still going to be a CeeDee Lamb team out there, but it's tricky. It's tricky to think through all of those little elements. Again, we've talked about it through this whole draft. This is why this is my favorite format. It truly is. I have loved doing these eliminators. I've loved thinking about them. It's taken a huge amount of my brain space this offseason. Like I said, I'm probably going to write a second eliminator piece just to be like, here's some other things I've thought about since the first eliminator piece I wrote, including that idea of the amount of the field that is remaining each week and how that falls off very quickly. And I plan to make all that available for free outside the paywall. So if you're not subscribed to the newsletter yet, go subscribe, bengretch.substack.com, just to the free emails, and you'll get those write-ups if you're interested in them. We're almost back up here, Sean, and I don't see the Chicago running backs haven't gone yet. Khalil Herbert's still there. Did Roshan go? You had him in the
No,
queue
they're
at one
both
point.
they're both there.
Okay.
I have moved Tyrone Tracy and Isaac Garendo to the top of the queue after our discussion. We had Tyrone Tracy talk a little bit at the end of the show last week, I believe, and then you were messaging me some fun information about him. He would be a week 11 bye, and then Garendo, I think, has a chance to. I mean, he's much narrower in terms of what probably has to happen, and yet if it does happen, it's massive. So those are a couple of guys I had there. We still do have the option of either Chicago running back.
Okay, the guy in the turn took Franklin on the last thing. Should we grab Nix here, or do you want to try to grab Nix at the end of the 18? I don't know if you actually want to go on Nix. We were really low on the clock. You took Nix there. I noticed this guy on the turn here between our picks, and we have a multiple running back options here we like. So coming back at 17-3, we're going to like one of them, I think. Tracy would have been my favorite there. I think you made a good case, but it could be either Chicago back or you just made a good case for Garendo. Next, we could have maybe tried to push, but this guy at the turn only has 2 quarterbacks, and I saw he took Franklin at the last turn and kind of pocketed that in the back of my mind that he might be somebody who takes. Did you want to keep this as a 2 QB build? We did just take Nix. I didn't really have a lot of time I didn't leave you with a lot of time.
I'm good either way. And Tracy does come back, and I think that
Nice.
Garendo has a good chance of coming back to us with the final pick. That makes this one pretty easy. And I mean, we're set up very nicely. So one of the things I had planned to say in the middle of the last kind of couple rounds sweeping through there is that we were set with 2 QB window quarterbacks that we liked. We were set with 7 wide receivers, 5 of whom were drafted early. All 7 have different buys. We're set with 2 elite tight ends in Trey McBride and Brock Bowers, both of whom obviously and thankfully have different buys, which, I mean, is something that we charted out. But every once in a while, Ben, I will take the second elite tight end with the same buy. Not in this format, but if it's just begging me to do it, and then take the third tight end late. So I just didn't want to act like there was no possibility I would ever have made that decision. But we were set to where our structural flexibility was extremely high. Certainly, I think this last pick now needs to be a running back. But I think we could have even gone to 7 backs if we had wanted, because we were so well set up otherwise. I do like the idea of having a second QB in weeks 6 and 7 and trying to make sure we get through those. And while some people may be a little bit skeptical, and justifiably, about what Nix will do from a scoring perspective early, I mean, if he's who I think he might be, and I mean, if he works just overall for your roster, then by week 6 he needs to kind of be working, would be my thesis.
Sorry, I was distracted by you talking about stacking the 2 early elite tight end buys, and I was like, I've run into that, but I can't remember who it is. But it's Kincaid and Pitts that both have the week 12 that you can really run into, because we do get kind of fortunate that the different elite QBs have different buys. Laporta's 5, Kelsey's 6, McBride's 11, Kittle's that 9 buy. Andrews is 14, but Kincaid and Pitts, I've definitely been in that spot where I'm like, I already took Kincaid. Now, the next round I want to take Pitts and make it 2 elite tight ends, but they have the same buy. Anyway, I'm just off on one of my tangents mentally. Who were you talking about that really would need to fit by week 6? I caught the end of that, but I didn't know what player you were discussing.
I was just saying that if Nix works at all, I mean, if he's a good pick as opposed to a pick that just generally speaking hurts the team, by week 6, I expect him not necessarily to be the highest scoring guy. I mean, you'd still love for Caleb Williams to be the highest scoring quarterback in week 6, and then Tua to come back and be the highest scoring quarterback in week 7. But I do like having that additional possibility with the third QB. And, we already have that week 17 Bengals Broncos game as something that does matter to us, having taken Jamar Chase in round 1.
And one of the things I'll say is there will be at least one team. We can maybe recap this in a second because we're 2 picks away. Garendo's still there. You also have Bigsby, Will Shipley in the queue. The Chicago backs have gone. Bigsby goes. I'm not really into Shipley. I'm totally fine with Garendo, especially with the week 9 bye. Okay, so Garendo makes it back. We're just going to snatch him up. One of the things about the Knicks pick that excited me, and we did like both the window QBs that we took, but with these two specifically, one of the things I think through in these builds and in the Eliminator is I do think, it can be a little bit overly precise, but we do need to think about the specific profiles. Tua, we obviously have some concussion risk, right? Like, I don't think his career is definitely going to end if he has another concussion, but if he has another concussion, I think he's at more risk to miss 2 games as a result, right? And that's a little bit of a pocket. Then he probably still comes back, but most guys maybe miss 1 game. And that could create some stress on Caleb Williams for a couple of weeks when you only have a 2 QB build, or if you go that direction. And then in Caleb Williams' side, even if he hits as a rookie QB, most young quarterbacks are going to have at least 1 game or a couple of games where they essentially just get found out, right? Like, CJ Stroud was probably the best rookie I can remember, the best rookie season we've seen in a long time, whatever. I don't know what I was saying probably for. Very good rookie season. He had a game against the Carolina Panthers where he only threw for 140 yards. He did have a rushing TD in that game. He had a game against the Saints where he only threw for 199. He got hurt in another one, so that's not really fair, but he only threw for 91 in that game against the Jets. He did have 23 attempts in that game, had taken 4 sacks when he left. I think he played more of that game than the 91 passing yards suggests, so he was on his way to a bad game and then got hurt. It's kind of what I'm saying. The point is, even in a season where, CJ Stroud came back from that Carolina Panthers game that was his worst game of the year probably, and threw 5 touchdowns and 470 yards the next week against Tampa. Like, he had some games like that were super fun. We know that CJ Stroud's awesome. Even if Caleb Williams hits, he's probably going to go into a game where the defensive coordinator schemed up something that they didn't talk about throughout the week, and he was not ready for, and he's got to make in-game adjustments, and he's just not ready for that, and it just bottoms out for him. And that, maybe it's different for every player. Maybe some rookies can do that. But like Trevor Lawrence had games like that early in his career. Burrow has had games where he's looked like that. They just look lost, young QBs, at some point. And so anyway, I like the idea of getting a 3rd QB on that build, even though it's another rookie QB, and Bo Nix will probably have that as well. But it's something that provides you a stability throughout the season. You think through how those weeks are going to piece together. To your point, if Bo Nix is a good pick, then we're going to, he's going to be a good pick by week 6 or week 7. I was going to say, where's the lack of optimism? Earlier in the offseason, you were the biggest Bo Nix fan that I know. I look at it like, I don't think there's any way he's not starting. He's like such a perfect fit for Peyton's scheme in all the ways that we've talked about every time we talk about Bo Nix. And Peyton's going to keep playing him through the struggles because he needs to be right on that. That's sort of the player that he's put his cards in. And Peyton's, for lack of a better word, egotistical like that. Like he wants to be right about that. He's going to push that. I don't think there's really any way that Nix doesn't play basically the whole year. That's not fair. If he's really poor, they'll bench him eventually. But I do think he's going to have a long leash, and he is going to be the week 1 starter. We took that Marvin Mims pick in addition to the Javonte Williams pick, so we have the running back receiver thing I was discussing throughout on that team as well. But I actually like it on the Knicks team because he's going to throw to Javonte Williams 85 times this year. If the Williams pick is right, Javonte. If the Mims pick is right, the Knicks pick is certainly right. I don't know. I think that's maybe my favorite pick of our whole draft. I think it was a really good fit to the 2 quarterbacks we had. I think we needed a stable 3rd QB. It could have been Fields, but some of those are a little bit trickier bets. We didn't have it stacked up. I really liked adding Nix, and then we do get Tracy and Garendo, so didn't have to pay for it. Those are the 2 running backs that I think you wanted to add there in 17 and 18.
What I'm hearing you say is that Bo Nix is going to be the 2024 version of Sam Howell. he's going to get 2/3 of the way through the year leading the NFL in passing yardage. And then instead of his team quitting, his coaches quitting, his coaches deciding to stop throwing the ball, his coaches going run, call a terrible third down play.
Sack.
And sack, right? Sack.
run, sack.
That Sean Payton is more the type of guy who's going to be like, I have a quarterback leading the NFL in passing yardage. That's a good thing. I'm a competitor. This guy is the quarterback of the future. We selected him with a top 15 pick. Let's go finish leading the NFL in passing and win everybody their fantasy football titles.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's going to be as high volume as Howell, so I don't think he can actually lead the league in passing. But I think like the directionally accurate element of what you're saying is something I believe. Like I do think they're going to throw more than most rookie quarterbacks do. Like he could be top 10 in passing and then continue to play through the rest of the season. I think he could be like a really big hit in that regard because well, that's what Peyton always did early. You know, and I know a lot of that is Drew Brees, and you're not going to do it necessarily right away with a rookie under center, but the short passing game as an extension of the run game is a philosophical thing for Sean Payton. And it's an efficiency element where if you're doing it well, you are sacrificing. What I was trying to say there was that you are not sacrificing much to get the running back the ball into space, as opposed to having to run through the line of scrimmage and all of these things. You're getting them out into an area where they're, even on a short completion, they're more likely to gain more yards than running up the middle. I think that's the whole idea of the West Coast offense, and the short passing game is the extension of the run game. And Peyton draws it up so well that it can be so efficient. And that's exactly what Knicks did so well in college, that part of it I'm very confident is going to work. And they're going to take shots downfield to keep defenses honest. They have Mims, they have Franklin. That's what Peyton always did with
both
the
of those
Saints.
guys have great speed.
Right. You're taking at least some shots to Devery Henderson and Robert Meacham and all that. And then you're hitting some, of the intermediate stuff as well, that the defenses can never collapse on the underneath passing, because that's the low volume or low value stuff. So you let them have the outlet pass, but you go to the outlet pass quicker than other teams do. You don't get through your progression down to it. It's almost like a first read dump off, I think, for some of Peyton's offenses, just to get, again, the extension of the handoff, get the ball to the running back outside the line of scrimmage so that he can get 6 yards instead of 3 yards on 1st and 10. And Knicks is going to be so efficient and accurate at that and on time with that. That's the part of Knicks's profile that's like undeniable, right? Like he's going to be able to do that. He didn't want to push the ball downfield. If you want to criticize Nick, you can call him a check down artist. I've said this when we talk about this. But you talked about how in his downfield passing, he's still accurate. And that's what the
reports much more efficient
yeah.
than the guys who are billed as vertical passers. And
Right.
So, again, a lot of that. And there are some stats from 2022 that make him look a little bit more aggressive. A lot of it is, can you execute your offense the way it's called? And at the same time, does your offense fit you? I think both of those things are going to be true.
That's the fit. That's what I'm so excited about. Can you execute what Sean Payton wants? That's what Bo Nix is. The element of him being accurate downfield, but still not having that many, big time throws is a stat that I've cited from PFF. Also having very few turnover worthy plays. No other quarterbacks anywhere near him in overall volume and stuff had as few big time turnover worthy plays, because it's already ingrained in him as a decision maker when he drops back that he can make those throws down the field. But he's more willing to take the high percentage underneath throw than most are. He probably is not a check down artist in a derogatory way, but he is more willing to just say, okay, I'll take the short, efficient completion, which is what Peyton wants. That's his whole system. That's what it's predicated on. That's why he was so excited about getting Bo Nix. And like you just said, it's the scheme fit is already there. And if Nix as long as he's just not terrible is the way that I'm thinking about it. Because if he's able to at least, I think part of why he was efficient on the downfield passing is he's checking down more. So the times he does pull the trigger are the high percentage times. Having said that, that fits. Again, that's what Peyton wants. You take those shots down the field when you can. And as long as he's decent enough down the field to keep defenses honest, he already some quarterbacks, you can't get them to check down. Trevor Lawrence's problem is that he's trying to throw into triple coverage when he should be checking down to Travis Etienne. And he has to learn to take what's there sometimes. That's what Mahomes has done so well in these last couple seasons. Josh Allen had to learn that after his first couple years. You got to be willing to throw underneath sometimes when the defense is giving you 8 yards on an easy completion. Those are really high percentage throws when the guy's wide open in an outlet and he's going to gain yards after the catch and get you, 8 yards on first down or whatever, or maybe 12 if he breaks a tackle, or 15. That's what is already ingrained in Bo Nix as a player. That's the part of his processing and decision-making. You got to teach him to push it downfield more. But that's, again, it's such a fit for Peyton. Anyway,
well,
I've done this rant before, but I'm just like, it all fits in my mind in terms of how I think of football. It fits too neatly, and it scares me how certain I am about this. I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, well, I think the certainty, I mean, one of the reasons why you'll often hear me sound a little bit scared about both Brock Bowers and about Bo Nix is that in both cases, the thesis and the price are too perfect. You're like, if it doesn't work, then it ends up being just such a massive bummer. I think with Nix, one of the things we have to remember is that even elite prospects at QB bust. And for all the positives, I don't think that we can put Nix in that category. At the same time, it is worth remembering that one of the things that I think is incorrect about Nix is the idea that it's a low ceiling play. I think he's got bust risk like quarterbacks have. Yeah. But I mean, the Oregon Ducks were running a fast break offense. You know that Sean Payton wants to run a fast break offense and score a lot of points. If it's not a bust situation, if it does hit, it doesn't necessarily hit for low ceiling. It could hit for everything that your heart desires. So that's the part that I think it's important to remember, is that both the floor is a lot lower than what it feels like with someone who's so clean. I mean, you mentioned the turnover worthy plays. He also takes no sacks, right? So it's going to be different when you face NFL defenses, but there's a lot of reason to believe, because he's got elite mobility. In 2022, he actually was a very good rusher. And so if you want to think about, how do you get like 2 or 3 or 4 rushing EP per game? I mean, if he hit 4 rushing EP per game, then again, it's a massive smash, right? And yet the floor is still very low, but the ceiling is higher than people are giving credit for in terms of how they're thinking through it.
I think that's really well put too. And I'm not blind to the bust risk either. That's a great point. Like, he could just be bad. I started to say and caught myself during that long rant that I basically didn't think there was any way that he could get benched or wouldn't. And then I was like, no, actually, I mean, he could definitely get benched. But I just think he has a decent leash because of the Peyton stuff, because Peyton handpicked him and has made all these quotes. And the way Peyton is, he's probably going to play him even if he makes mistakes. He's going to tell you in the press conference, yeah, we're seeing positives and this and that. Because he's really kind of tying his own name and his own quarterback evaluation to Bo Nix. He wants him to work for a lot of reasons. But you're right. There could just be an element where we're wrong on the evaluation and Bo Nix is bad. And he was elevated by the Oregon system and the players around him and the whatever, right? Pac-12 defenses being bad. And it could be a lot of, factors that lead to it. It just is one of those things that fits so neatly in the analytical part of my brain that I'm like, I don't think the market sees it for a few reasons, Sean. I think one of the big ones is that a lot of this stuff goes back to the Peyton years with the Saints, where people are either writing it off because of Breeze, or they just weren't watching football back then. They weren't playing fantasy football 10 years ago when they weren't doing projections in 2012 when it was every season like clockwork, the running back pass attempts and the production and the way that offense operated. And I do think, yes, Drew Brees had a lot to do with that. A big part of it was his ability to process quickly and get down to the check down and throw accurately to the running back, which not every quarterback throws accurately to the running back. It should be an easy throw, but Bo Nix does. Not saying he's the next Drew Brees, and I do think Drew Brees elevated all of that because he's a Hall of Fame star. But the fact that last year, man, after all that time off, Peyton came back and got Russell Wilson to throw to the running back position, and they led the NFL with 153 running back targets, was the last piece of the puzzle for me, where I'm like, I don't think people realize that this really is all Sean Payton wants to do. It's like build his offense around running back targets like that. And you understand why. I just tried to explain it, but you get the guy in space and all of that stuff. If you can do it in a high efficiency way and it's a low risk play, it can be so valuable. Let's talk through the
One of the
build.
reasons too that I think that like Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims is interesting there, and I'm not necessarily completely pushed off of Troy Franklin by some of these early reports that other guys might be ahead of him, and that he might have a hard time finding work, or even is the third guy behind Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims that you don't get there. I mean, you talked about the running back value. And it was interesting hearing you talk about the projections and 2012 and all of those types of things. I've teased this before. I do promise that eventually this article is going to come out. Thankfully, we're still in the middle of June, so it's not any emergency. But the piece that I've been talking about, where I kind of work through the Seahawks, one of the elements in there is trying to kind of calibrate my expectations for the likelihood of offenses to support 3 wide receivers, what needs to happen for offenses to support 3 wide receivers. And I don't think this comes as a shock to anybody, but if you're going through and you're looking for historically, so individual team seasons this century, where a team supported 3 wide receivers, so that can be 3 receivers or 2 receivers and a tight end. And I think it's probably not surprising to people that mostly when it happens, it actually is 2 receivers and a tight end. But 3 receiving weapons of the non-running back variety of 150 plus PPR points. And when that sort of happens, it does come through that elite quarterbacks have a pretty decent chunk of those. And that 18 of those seasons come from Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees. They each have 6, which they're in a 3-way tie for first. One of the reasons I think that we are seeing a little bit less of that currently is that you don't have those 3 guys playing in the NFL.
Right.
And it's not easy to replicate it, even with similar coaches, if you don't have that talent. And yet there are some teams like the Andy Reid teams, for example, like Patrick Mahomes. And again, it's going to depend on your personnel. If you have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, then it is going to be more like you just have the 2 superstars. You're not bothering as much with the third guy, especially if the third guy is not good. But those Saints offenses were so high volume that in terms of the passing game, in terms of the yardage, in terms of the efficiency, all of those types of things, that you could support a lot of weapons. That's great for the weapons. It's also great for the QB. Structurally, that's what they want to accomplish. It's much more likely that they accomplish that in 2026 than 2024. But by 2026, if they're on that path and, the second half of 2025 is fantastic, what have you, you're not going to get a price that allows you to take advantage of it. Whereas in round 16 here, if they manage some of those things in some weeks, and then certainly if they're managing some of those things down the stretch, that's where you win.
That's exactly, yeah, man. You've been doing this all show. You do it a lot. I love it. You have this habit of saying something, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have said it that way. It makes perfect sense when you say it. I'm trying to like sputter it out, but that's what I was trying to get to. Like, I'm not hyper confident that Bo Nix is Drew Brees. I'm not even hyper confident that what Sean Payton did with Drew Brees. There's all other elements I've thought about, like they played in a dome down there in New Orleans, right? That helps that short passing efficiency. They're playing in freaking Denver, in December in Denver in the snow. It's going to be hard for Bo Nix to throw to the running back as much as it was for Drew Brees in December in New Orleans in a dome. Like there's different elements to this, and obviously Brees is a different player. I don't think you mentioned the Mims thing. I was curious. You were talking about the 3 receivers at higher than 150, and it was interesting to hear that Brees is on there 6 times as much as Brady and Manning. Because I don't think I would have guessed that because of all the running back production. You said it was non-running back. I assume on a few of those seasons for him, he basically had the second and third guy just above 150, like in the 160 to 170 range. 2 pretty solid seasons, like a Lance Moore having like 170 points. I know he had a couple years like that where the secondary guys were pretty solid. Brandon Cooks.
Well,
there were some years where it was flat.
Yeah, and you have Michael Thomas and Jimmy Graham, for example. You've got some really high scores, and yet still being able to manage the third guy. And I always kind of hate the thing of, you wouldn't be able to do it in redraft, but you can do it in best ball. Some of those names that you mentioned in terms of Devery Henderson, Robert Meacham, I mean, people would be like fighting each other to add them into the middle of the roster, like dramatically overdrafting their total score, but thinking, Drew Brees is going to hit those guys for a couple long touchdowns. the week that it matters.
In
And I'm
week
gonna win the whole
17.
thing.
Yeah.
And
It's kind
so,
of like Rashid Shaheed this year. Like they would be going where Rashid Shaheed goes. But yeah,
yeah,
Knicks
Troy
maybe can't
Franklin, Marvin
support.
Mims. I
Do you
I
think
think you want to be careful, but I
yeah.
do think that you want to keep putting those. And one of the things that Pete and I were devastated about yesterday is that we need your receivers, but we got blocked off of both of those guys and Wan'Dale Robinson. And you're like, well, now we're going to get really into the dregs of people we have as late round targets.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think for Knicks, it's probably a little bit trickier to see the for me to see him support the 3 downfield guys for the reasons you said. It's elite quarterbacks. The running back stuff is the stuff that is like, and that's the foundation, I would say, of Peyton's offense. So if he can do that, I think Peyton will put up with if he's not good enough in other areas. But anyway, I've said enough about Knicks. We should.
Yeah, Ben, before we close up, this isn't the best time to have done it, but I was mentioning the tweet / evidence that Blair had shared with me. That was from Neil Farley. I hope I have that name correct. Obviously, I should have mentioned that earlier in the show, but that was the information on if you're better spread with your bye weeks, your advance rate is better. That's from a season ago. So anyway, wanted to get his name in there since I had referenced that earlier. Ben,
I was going to say we got to read the roster. We haven't told the people the final team that we drafted. We started with Jamar Chase in round 1. We went Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Trey McBride, Jaden Reed. First 5 picks, 0 RB, 4 running backs, 1 tight end. We did take Kenneth Walker at a value in late 6 at 6.10, pick 70. Then Deontay Johnson, Brock Bowers. So through 8 rounds, the 1 running back, 2 tight ends, and 5 receivers at that point. We go Javonte Williams. We hit the back-to-back QB windows at 10 and 11 at that turn. Caleb Williams and Tua Tagovailoa. We grabbed Quentin Johnston in 12. At this point, we still only had 2 running backs. Jalen Wright in 13, Marvin Mims in 14, J.K. Dobbins in 15. That 14-15 turn, we just missed Bucky Irving. We had a couple spots where we just missed a player. We also just missed Jalen Warren earlier. Bo Nix, Tyrone Tracy, Isaac Guerrero close it out. In the Eliminator format, we are thin at running back, but I'm comfortable with it in this format because I feel really good about our elite onesie positions. We have both Trey McBride and Brock Bowers. We have the 3 QBs to support good quarterback production each week, including 2 in that QB window. There should be upside at quarterback for us. And we have enough early wide receiver firepower. We could have potentially had even more, frankly, wide receiver firepower. That could be something that harms this team as we go. We know that a lot of receivers go off at Underdog. Sometimes you need to take 5 or 6 in the first 5 or 6 rounds just to get enough. But we have a lot, and I think we have enough that can be a strength as well. Plus, again, as you noted during the draft, to get Kenneth Walker as the RB1 while you're building out those other elements, there's still ceiling there, right? We didn't get Jalen Warren, but we took Javonte Williams as the RB2. There's still ceiling there. If my prediction that he'll get 85 targets is true, that would certainly go a long way. Again, the running back depth is tough. We might have some zeros at running back at times. I think you can advance in an eliminator. You can be top half in your pod with a 0 at RB2. I don't think that's a doomsday element, especially when we have the ceiling potential we have at QB, at all the receiver spots, and at tight end. So anyway, that would be my breakdown. I really like the way this worked, Sean. And I mean, it was a blast drafting an eliminator with you. I think we could draft a lot of plus EV eliminator teams if we wanted to.
Yeah, I love this team. And one of the reasons that we went with the 2 QBs in the window is a perfect fit in terms of how the roster was set up. It also was a spot where the running back value really wasn't there. And so that's kind of the decision for me, or how that decision is made frequently, is that if the running backs are there, I will often go ahead and take the values, maybe only get 1 QB in the window. But if they're not there, you get your window QBs. You're set up very, very nicely to also be a high-scoring team at the QB position. Ben, we did accomplish our objectives, which were to get through. We actually ended up with no buy overlap on any position on this roster. Very, very exciting.